are collected by this kind of authority, by this kind of institution. So it can't be used to create a dictatorial government, and also people will trust it far more. If I know that my data is just being collected by a health authority, just concerned with health, I will be willing to cooperate far more willingly than if it is the secret police. You know, in many countries, there are also, religious minorities, ethnic minorities, which are quite fearful of the government. For instance, in Israel, it's the Palestinian population. Now, in order to deal with an epidemic, you need the cooperation of 100% of the population. Not 50%, not 70%, you need everybody. Now, Israel, again, the Palestinians will never cooperate with a surveillance system which is operated by the security services because they don't trust it and they have good reason to fear it. But if it is operated by an independent medical authority, they will be far more willing to cooperate. So this, I think, is one of the guidelines we should keep in mind.
ハラリさんがイギリスのフィナンシャル・タイムズに寄稿したコロナウイルス後の世界。この中にちょっと目を引く記述がありました。緊急時のプディング。イスラエル国民がデザートに好んで食べるプディング、その流通や原材料などを国家が規制する法令です。制定されたのは1948年、イスラエル建国直後に中東諸国との間で起きた第一次中東戦争の時でした。イスラエル政府は非常事態として土地の接収や経済統制など一時的な緊急措置を行いました。その中でプディングさえも国家の規制の対象とされたのです。ハラリさんはこう続けます。
これらの一時的な措置の多くはその後も廃止されることなく続いた。
このエピソードからハラリさんは何を訴えようとしているのでしょうか。
You also drew an example from recent history about in reference to rules and regulations being sticky and outliving the emergency. You spoke about the pudding decree.
Yeah.
And that has become a kind of a buzzword in the social media. People are wondering what specific pudding are you talking about and what is it about the pudding decree? Can you elaborate?
Yes. So there was a time of economic crisis immediately after the war. So they issued all kinds of emergency decrees about distribution of food, including ice cream and pudding, which are considered luxuries. So there was also an emergency decree about pudding, about limiting the use of pudding and when you can serve it and whatever. And they only abolished that in 2011, which is ridiculous.
That is quite recent.
Yeah. I mean, the emergency itself is still not abolished, and many emergency decrees from 1948 are still legal, are still shaping Israeli society today. This particular emergency decree about pudding, it was abolished in 2011. So I just gave it as a funny example of the way that you do something in emergency. You think it's only for the duration of this crisis. Once the crisis is over, we'll go back to normal. But this is an illusion. The emergency or the emergency measures tend to get a life of their own and to continue long after the initial conditions have changed. So this is also what is likely to happen now. For instance, with surveillance, that we agree to certain surveillance systems now to fight corona, but once the corona crisis is over, they won't disappear. They may remain and gain a new life of their own.
And also, history does suggest that even after the crisis, Now, leaders also are reluctant to surrender the ground it has gained during the time of emergency. So that's something that we should keep an eye on also.
Yes, we should be very, very careful. We need emergency decrees. We need strong and fast action, but it should be done in a democratic and balanced way without giving too much power to any single individual.
人類が大切に育んできた民主主義社会をパンデミックの中でどうしたら守っていけるのか。ハラリさんの文章の中に重要なキーワードがあります。市民に力を与えるという意味のエンパワーメントです。
市民に力を与えることで私たちは自分の健康を守り、新型コロナウイルスの感染拡大を防ぐことができる。
Going on to humanity and corona and about people's empowerment. Some say still that the robust surveillance regime have actually proved right in containing the pandemic. But you say it should be more about citizens' empowerment. Can you please elaborate?
Yes, again, I'm not against surveillance. I am certainly in favor of using the new technologies to track the spread of the epidemic and stop it. But it's basically what I said before. Surveillance should empower the citizens and not only the government in two ways. First, the data being gathered about my medical condition and the medical condition of other people should not be held and kept secret by the government, but I should know, I should have access to this data so that I can make better decisions about my own health, and also I can test for myself whether the policies that the government is adopting are really working or not. You know, in authoritarian countries like Iran, so that the population just doesn't know whether the government is even publishing the reliable data about the number of dead people, about the spread of the epidemic. So the data should be transparent, so it should go both ways. And this is citizen empowerment. If the citizens have access to this kind of information, they have more power, and a well-informed and self-motivated population is far, far more effective than a policed, ignorant population, even in dealing with emergencies.
You spoke about empowering the people, the citizens, and I do believe this will be a test for the citizenship. But what is required on the part of the citizens themselves? Because they cannot afford to wait to be empowered.
Well, citizens have many responsibilities in a time like this. One is on the level of information and behavior, to be very careful about the information you believe, to trust in scientific authority, and then to implement the guidelines which have a scientific backing. If citizens follow scientific guidelines, this will greatly reduce the need for emergency dictatorial measures. So it's very important, this is the job of each one of us, to really educate ourselves about what's happening, who should we believe, and then follow closely the guidelines of respectable scientific authorities, whether it's somebody from a university or somebody from the health ministry, and not to fall victim to all kinds of conspiracy theories. I hope we'll have the same kind of trust when scientists warn us about things like climate change. We should take the same way we now take very seriously what epidemiologists tell us about disease. We should have the same kind of trust when climate scientists are warning us about global warming.
In the face of this pandemic, some say that the key lies in deglobalization if this pandemic was the outcome of globalization. Obviously, you do not agree.
No. When pandemics occurred long before the era of globalization, in the Middle Ages, there were no airplanes, no big cruise ships. Still, there were pandemics, much worse ones, like the Black Death. If you think you can prevent pandemics by isolation, you actually need to go all the way back to the Stone Age. The time in history when there were no pandemics was in the Stone Age, when people lived in small hunter-gatherer societies, moving around all the time, no villages, no cities. Then there were no pandemics. And obviously we can't go back there. So the real antidote to pandemics is not isolation, it's cooperation and information. Our biggest advantage over the virus is that humans can cooperate in ways that viruses cannot. A virus in China cannot give information to a virus in the USA about how to infect or how to avoid the human immune system. But a doctor in China can give advice to a doctor in the US. The government of China can help the government of the US. They can form a common plan of how to fight the virus globally. This is our biggest advantage over the virus. If we don't use this advantage, the crisis will be far, far worse. Again, people should realize that as long as the epidemic spreads in any country, it endangers the whole of humankind. So yes, we need now quarantine and closing borders and restricting movement of people, but even, even for that, you need cooperation and information. Now, countries like China, like South Korea, they have extremely valuable information, both about the spread of the disease and also about how to gradually come out of lockdown. China is now trying to ease the regulations, the quarantine. And the information, the lessons it learns by doing it, later on, it can help countries in Europe, countries all over the world, to know what is the most effective way. If each country just takes care of itself, all this valuable information will be lost. If the Chinese government now makes a mistake in how it tries to ease the lockdown and doesn't share the information, later on, Italy, Spain, Canada will just repeat the same mistake. So even for lockdown, it should be done in a globalized way, pooling information. If somebody in Italy has a good idea, it should enable everybody.
危機に立ち向かうには、情報の共有と連帯こそが必要だと訴えるハラリさん。しかし、世界の現状は憂慮すべき方向へ向かっています。ハラリさんへのインタビューから1週間後、アメリカのトランプ大統領による決定が世界に衝撃を与えました。
Today I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization. Had the WHO done its job to call out China's lack of transparency, the outbreak could have been contained at its source. This would have saved thousands of lives and avoided worldwide economic damage.
We regret the decision of the President of the United States. WHO works to improve the health of many of the world's poorest.
マスクをめぐっても、アメリカは周辺国との間で摩擦を引き起こしています。トランプ大統領が民間企業の物資を統制できる国防生産法を用い、医療用マスクなどの輸出制限を発令したのです。カナダのトルドー首相はこれに強く反発しました。
And it would be a mistake to create blockages or reduce the amount of back and forth trade of essential goods and services.
世界的な危機に対して 国際社会はどのように連帯していけばよいのでしょうか。
You've spoken about the need for more cooperation and solidarity, but in the absence of leaders who are entrusted by the people, how is that possible? Who is going to fill in that void?
I think one of our biggest problems in this crisis is the lack of leadership, which is the result of events in the last few years. During the 2014 Ebola epidemic and during the 2008 economic crisis, we saw much better global leadership. The USA assumed the role of global leader, and enough countries rallied around it to prevent the worst outcome. Over the last 3 or 4 years, two things happened. First of all, the United States resigned from its role as global leader and became self-absorbed, caring only about America, nobody else. America first. America now has no friends, just interests. And secondly, the entire international atmosphere has changed. We see growing global animosity and disunity all over the world. And this is how we entered this crisis. And this is one of the reasons it's proving so difficult to deal with it. Because without cooperation, it will be very, very difficult to stop the epidemic, and even more difficult to prevent economic collapse. So I hope we will see more leadership, maybe from other countries. The US, even now, when the US administration finally realized the magnitude of this crisis, still they don't assume any kind of global leadership role. And even if they try, I don't think anybody would trust them. If the Americans now come with a global plan of action, who would trust the current American administration? So I hope that other countries all over the world will fill the gap and will see a kind of collective leadership.
In the absence of viable leadership, would you think like businesses or the grassroots citizens be able to fill part of the void?
Yes, part of the void can be filled by businesses, organizations, ordinary citizens, for instance, by sharing information, but also, I think, by exerting political pressure on their own governments. If the public tells the government, look, this is an emergency, we need medical equipment, but we know that other countries are in an even worse situation, and we want to be more responsible and to show greater solidarity. So please help the other countries. We are willing to carry the burdens of it. Then governments, at least in some countries, will respond to it. And I hope that we'll see this greater global solidarity, not just because it's essential for dealing with this crisis, but also because it will affect the world after the crisis. If you just think about climate change, the big crisis that is still developing all around us, we obviously need global solidarity to deal with that.
We will have to be ending in a few minutes, but if you could define a victory, how would you define it? Because coronavirus is not something that can be eradicated.
Well, first, I think we shouldn't think about it as a war. It's a wrong metaphor. In a war, ultimately you have soldiers with guns killing each other. This is a very different kind of situation. I mean, the heroes of this situation is a nurse in hospital changing bed sheets. The whole crisis is about taking care of people, not about killing and winning. Yes, we need to win against the virus, but no human being should be seen as an enemy. So I think we should leave aside this metaphor of war and battle and victory. And success, I think, would be if we take care of all humans around the world. if we protect humans all over the world from the spread of the virus, and if we protect humans all over the world from the economic consequences of the crisis. If we protect people just in our country and other countries would completely collapse, I would not define that as a success.